Hello, it's an actual pleasure to be able to share with you this morning. My name's Glenn. I'm 48 years old and I'm currently living in Porthcawl, South Wales. I just want to take you back to the beginning of my life. As a small child, I had a good family growing up, but right from an early age, I became very troublesome and found it very hard to concentrate at school, and just found it difficult to be a good child. So from a very early age, I started experimenting with drugs, smoking, drinking, sniffing solvents, and by the time I was the age of 14, I was placed into care because my mother at the time thought it was the best thing for me because she couldn't cope with me. So first of all, I went to foster parents and they couldn't control me, and it was just spiraling into just an uncontrollable young man. So then I got expelled from school, so I still had to have an education, so I got sent to a boarding school in Devon. And by the time I was 16, my mother told me that the father that I thought was my father wasn't, which played a very devastating blow and a very detrimental course of action, and it felt like my whole world was just falling in on me, and I tried to commit suicide at a very early age of 16. I was very successful at that, and as I continued with my life, I just become more and more troublesome, more and more dabbling in soft drugs and hanging around with the wrong crowd. When I was 18, I received my first prison sentence, and from the age of 18 until 38, the majority of that was spent in prison. I've done about 20 years in prison now, for the path that I chose to take. I started experimenting in harder drugs, crack cocaine, heroin, and it took me to the gutters. It took me to a place where I was living in dirty, filthy squalor, and the squat that I was living in was literally the same toilet that I used to use. So it brought me to a point in my life, such a broken person that I was, that I couldn't even see the filth that was on my own body and the filth that was around me. I just didn't care. Now it got to a point where I walked into a church, a cathedral in Gloucester, and I cried out to God, because I always believed in God, but it was just stories at the time. But this is a time where I really need help. I had two choices in my life, whether I was going to do life imprisonment, which was just the norm for me, or I was going to die from injecting myself every single day with poison. So the Lord answered my prayer, and He took me to a place called Bethel, which is a Christian community for people with homeless problems and people with addiction problems. And I went there and I met Jesus. It's just as plain, as simple as that. There's such a massive revelation of what Jesus and what the cross means, and that I was forgiven no matter what I did, but there is a perfect plan for me. And I began to grab that only hope that I ever had. I had nothing else, but I put my whole trust in that one scripture, and by doing that, God has showed me His faithfulness. in such a mighty, powerful way that it's absolutely mind-blowing, and it's such a blessing to my life today to be able to speak to you and bear witness and testimony of a transformed life in knowing Jesus and following Jesus as a disciple. Now, it's been 12 years ago that I was been following and walking with the Lord seriously, and it was a further, I think maybe 14 years ago, last time I seen the prison gates. So it's just an amazing revelation in itself.